So okay? So
well, what I was saying is
this is part two. Hold on, this is part two of how the first hip hop record got made and played. If you didn't see part one, watch part one of the video because we were already speaking for an hour. So we're gonna pick up where you left off. You were saying.
Well, the thing about it is that I basically have said most of what I wanted to say about how the first hip hop record got made. But what I was saying, I was talking about what happened to the cities. Why the Bronx was such a wasteland. Why these cities turned into such a wasteland by the early 70s and whatnot, and it's largely because of the fact that that the nation deindustrialized. They shipped in manufacturing overseas because it was cheaper to produce stuff in China or in Bangladesh. And of course the Chinese, after the Great Cultural Revolution, Deng Xiaoping, who had been a longtime comrade of the great Mao Zedong, who led the Great Chinese Revolution, they had a falling out over economic policy. And when Mao died, Deng issued everybody was wearing, Mao suits and whatnot, everybody was very austere. Deng advanced a slogan that said, "It's glorious to be rich." And what they did was this. The Chinese had the most painless industrial revolution ever. Industrial revolutions generally are very painful and disruptive affairs, as Marx describes in his Communist Manifesto, or Das Kapital, the 3 volumes of Das Kapital, where he describes what early capitalism was like in Britain when the Industrial Revolution was taking place. But Mao Zedong, after the death of Mao Zedong and the rise of Deng Xiaoping, what he decided to do was this. He decided, why should we go through all of this toil and turmoil? We'll just let Mighty Whitey do it, okay? So he came over and told, the white folks, that, look, if you are willing to relocate your factory in China, here's what we can offer you. We can offer you a vast labor pool of disciplined labor. You're not going to have to worry about strikes and none of that kind of stuff. We will offer you this labor pool cheaply. We won't tax you. And we will give you access to our vast, vast consumer market. Well, Karl Marx said, a capitalist will sell the hangman the rope to hang him with if he thinks he can make money. So this is what happened here. All these American companies relocated to China. You hear Donald Trump talking about how the Chinese ripped us off. They didn't rip nobody off. These companies willfully went over there, and for the reasons that I said. And the Chinese had one demand. There's only one thing in exchange for all of this we're giving you. We only want one thing from you. To teach us how to build and run these factories. And that's why right now China is the #1 manufacturing nation in the world. And the United States is on the way down. But by the 70s, when hip hop came along, these cities had been deindustrialized. So there was nowhere for young working class people to get a job where they could make a living and sustain themselves. That's why the crime rate was what it was. And so when you hear the first hip hop record that caught my attention, that began to make me a hip hop fan, was Melly Mel and the Furious 5. The message: don't push me. I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. And that caught me. And then Kool Moe Dee, with How You Like Me Now, in the Wild Wild West. And I ended up becoming a rap fan. And when I started writing at the Village Voice, this was at a time like in the 80s when hip hop was like reaching its apex, and there was a group of brilliant writers, at the Voice who wrote about hip hop. Harry Allen, who hasn't gotten nearly what his due, but that's because Harry was a real. Harry used to call himself a media assassin. Now you can't call yourself a media assassin and constantly attack the media and expect to be successful. So he ended up with a show on WBI called Stranger Than Fiction. But then there was Barry Michael Cooper, a truly gifted writer, who is the one that wrote. Barry Michael Cooper invented the term New Jack City. He wrote the script for the movie New Jack City.
And they filmed New Jack City right around here.
Yeah, and he named the music that was being created by Al B. Shore, Heavy D, what was Guy, that group Guy? He named
New Jack Swing.
Yeah, New Jack Swing. He's the one that created the term New Jack Swing. He wrote a big essay that really wiped me out. It was called Groove Master. Yeah, the title of it was Groove Master, and the subtitle was How New York Gangsters Created a Genius. That was it. It was the Teddy Riley story. It was the story of Teddy Riley and Guy, and it was in this essay that Barry Michael Cooper coined the term New Jack City, the New Jack Swing. You know, he had coined the term New Jack City in a article he wrote for a national magazine. I'm trying to remember which one it was now. He wrote it anonymously. He went to Detroit. He operated, you know, in the shadows, you know, what social scientists or anthropologists call a participant observer. You know, he moved around, you know, the drug circles, and he ended up writing a smash piece called New Jack City, How Motown Devours Its Young. You know, this thing just skyrocketed, you know, and then he started writing. He was just one of the most original writers, you know, out here writing about hip hop. He was just wonderful. I mean, he wrote the script to Above the Rim.
Above the Rim.
He wrote the script to New Jack City. He wrote the script to Sugar Hill. You know, he wrote a whole series of these gangster movies because the way he could write about this gangster life on the page was so compelling. He grew up in Harlem. He grew up right over here in Esplanade Gardens, right? And the way he could write about this gangster scene, this young gangster scene, was so compelling on paper that movie producers came to him. They came to him to ask him to write the script of New Jack City, and that's what started him as a film writer. You know, now Michael had a bit of a problem in that he liked angel dust. And I ain't putting this business in the street because he wrote about it himself. He wrote a piece about getting high on angel dust one night that scared the shit. If I had ever thought about it, I never would have touched it. I never thought about it anyway. But if I did, that would have deterred me from it, and that's the reason he wrote it. He's talking about smoking some angel dust one cold night, you know, and he got kind of disoriented, and he ended up sitting down on the stoop of somebody's house, and it was a winter night with a beautiful full moon, and he talks about sitting there watching the moon and then watching the moon slowly become covered with blood and begin to drip. You know what I mean? So I thought anything that make me see that, I don't want nothing to do with it. You understand what I'm saying? And he ended up leaving New York to get away from this scene. You understand? But he was one of the writers there. Joan Morgan was one of the women writers. Dream Hampton was one of the women writers. Greg Tate was one of the writers in there. I mean, it was a gifted group, and Nelson George. But Nelson George was the black music editor for what is it? The top magazine in the music business. I forget.
Not Vibe magazine.
Not Vibe.
Not The Source.
He was the black music editor for this magazine, which was the major music magazine that covered the whole pop music scene. I can't think of it right now. But anyway, he came from there over to The Voice, and he wrote about hip-hop, but he wrote about hip-hop in a different way. Nelson George was more of a conventional type journalist. You know, he wrote about it in like conventional repertorial terms. It was very detailed and accurate. But these guys, Greg Tate, Barry Michael Cooper, most of all, Harry Allen, Joan Morgan, they were all word sorcerers. You know, I mean, this stuff was like prose poetry. It was like marvelous. You know what I mean? The words dance off the page. You know, and I was in the mix. And if you go on Google and put Playfell Benjamin in the Village Voice, the one piece of mine that come up right away is a piece called Two Funky White Boys.
I posted it on my Instagram page.
Oh, did you really? Yeah. I mean,
and I remember being a kid and seeing them, one of them at least, in the living room. Was it MC Search?
Yeah, MC Search, yeah.
Yeah, he used to be in the living room.
Yeah.
And then I remember when my twin brother and two other little boys.
They're in the video, the gas face. Yeah, they're in the video.
And I remember I was mad because I felt I think I went to get my hair done and I came home and found they were in the video.
Yeah, they were there in the video.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that Makeda had...
And the funny thing is, I remember Maury told me that Flavor Flav was on the set, and he was he said the Flavor Flav was in the back cursing, and he said you got mad and cursed Flavor Flav. I was like, don't you see his kids back here? But he started cursing them out.
But let me tell you this: she had a fantastic childhood. The great actor Samuel L. Jackson babysat her. You know.
Yeah, Samuel L. Jackson's daughter was my best friend.
She people like Wynton Marsalis. You know, the great writer Stanley Crouch. Greg Tate lived right across the street, you know. She grew up around all kinds of famous and fascinating people, you know, and Alan Counter, and the world's great scientists, you know what I mean? So that's why when she say things like I saw one time, she wrote on Facebook, she said, listen, you know, I'm not impressed with this street scholar bullshit. I grew up around real intellectuals, you know, and it's true. You know, she grew up around all kind of fascinating things. I used to take her, when I was doing television, I used to take her to let them watch me, you know, do these TV shows, you know, and whatnot. Some of which you can see on YouTube.
And we used to sit you on the radio. The first time I was on the radio was in the 4th grade. And I was on his radio show, and I was talking about, with one of my childhood best friends, I was talking about women's reproductive rights.
That's right.
And animal, I don't know why at that age, but I was talking about women's reproductive rights, and I was talking about the animal rights people, because you used to take me back then. That's when the PETA people were throwing paint on people's fur coats.
Yeah.
And I had a rabbit fur that my aunt gave me, and you used to take me out to like Lincoln Center or to see music or the ballet or whatever, and I would have my fur coat.
I know, and I would pack it. I would think I wish a motherfucker would.
I used to say that. I used to say if somebody threw paint on my coat, I'm kicking them, because I was a kicker and I was gonna kick them to death. Like I was like, nobody better not throw paint on my coat. So I remember going on the radio talking about that, and we used to be in the radio station with you all the time too.
So she had a fabulous upbringing, and that's one of the reasons why she has a low tolerance for lightweight bullshit, you know, because she knew what's substantive. Because from the time she was a little girl, she couldn't just come and tell me something was true. I would say, well, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence for this? You know, and as a consequence, both of them became very well aware that you have to have evidence for the shit you say, and that's the reason why they never had any trouble in school. You went right now. I don't know if you know this, but she's in graduate school working in a graduate degree on cannabis science. She's in a trend-setting program, one of the first graduate programs out here that's actually scientifically studying marijuana. And one of the things that I've learned is, she says that the reason I'm so sharp at 80 years old, me and my friends, because we've been firing up all these years. Now you see, let me tell you,
it's true.
When she was a kid, see, I've always felt that there's a great French sociologist named Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States in the 1830s, and he wrote a 2-volume book called Democracy in America. It's the first scholarly treatise ever written on American democracy. And in it, he says that there's a danger to democracy, because if the rights of unpopular minorities are not protected, democracy can become the tyranny of the majority. And black people have always lived under the tyranny of the majority in this country. And I felt like the marijuana laws was just one more example of the tyranny of the majority. I didn't want no damn liquor drinkers telling me I couldn't smoke herb. So I smoked herb. I've been smoking herb for 60 years, you know, since this magical Puerto Rican lady, you know, gave me some, you know what I mean? And I've been smoking it ever since. And I smoked it, first of all, because I really like it, instead of saying, but also smoked it as an act of defiance against what I consider to be oppressive and unjust laws, which I have fought against all my life on all kinds of levels. I'm a fighter. So I wrote a piece called This Bud's for You. many people think it's one of the best pieces ever written attacking the hypocrisy of marijuana laws. It won me the that, and of course my columns in the Daily News about it. It won me the first annual Tom Foucault Award. Tom Foucault was the founder of High Times magazine, and they give an award for honesty and accuracy in drug reporting. I'm the first one to win it.
I didn't know.
My prize was a beautiful plaque and a big ounce of killer weed. I mean, this was Sensibilla, you know, from up there in Humboldt County, you know. And see, the thing is, in this piece, This Buzz for You, it was inspired by my going up to Humboldt County, you know, and seeing, you know, the meeting the reefer growers and what have you. But the thesis of my piece is that the anti-marijuana laws represented the tyranny of the majority, and now they've gotten rid of them. Now it's legal. You know, now, even though people be sitting out on the park over here smoking, when I light up, I'd still be looking around and whatnot because, you know, I'm 80 years old. And most of my life, it was illegal. You could go to jail for smoking. What Elvis Cleaver say, they sent me to jail for having a shopping bag full of love.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And the interesting thing for me, and I always say this, is like, you know, I grew up around, you know, my dad and his friends, who they're all in their 80s now. They're all mentally sharp. You know, I grew up, you see the intensity. If you listen to this video and the other conversation I did with my dad the other day, and we have so many more conversations to do, or if you watch him online, he's intense. And he's been like this every single day of my life, ever since I could think. And, you know, it has always been about researching, you know, reading credible sources, being able to back up what I'm saying. And I grew up watching him, listening to him have these intellectual conversations with all these intellectuals all my life, and they were smoking. And so I never saw it, but also...
Let me tell you this.
But also...
I didn't think... I'm going to tell you. Mm-hmm. I didn't think... This is a big apartment, right? So I used to be up in the front writing, and I'd be up there and I'd take a sip every now and then, and if I started to hear them coming down the hall, if I had, I'd put it out right quick. So my wife asked me one day, her mother said, let me ask you a question. Do you think these kids don't know you smoke marijuana? And they must have been in about, the 7th or 8th grade or something. They're young. But 6th grade, 6th, 7th, maybe 7th grade. And she said, you think they don't know you smoke marijuana? I said, no, they don't know I smoke. She said, I bet they do. I said, I bet. I said, no, they don't. She said, well, call them lady and ask them. So I called them, you know, and I asked them, I said, do you all know what marijuana is? He said, yeah. I said, do you know what it's, have you ever seen anybody smoking? And they say, listen, Daddy, we live in New York City. Of course we see people smoke marijuana. I said, well, do you know what it smells like? And they said, yeah. So I said, well, when is the last time you smelled something? And they got very quiet, and my son fell out laughing. He said, well, I smell something right now.
Let me tell you something. So I don't remember that part.
Yeah, that's happening.
But what I remember, I just remember you and just seeing you. And I remember, like, when you said to us, we were like 12 years old or something, and my dad said, listen, I smoke reefer every day. And I don't care if you guys smoke, but just wait till you're 18 and your brain is fully developed. After you're 18, your brain is fully developed. I remember you said that, and I took it seriously. Like, I was not, even though I grew up around it, I wasn't smoking in high school or junior high. Like, a lot of people talk about they were smoking weed at 12 and 13. I definitely was not doing that. But I never saw it as, it's just like when you're a kid, you know that drinking alcohol is for adults, right?
Yeah.
So it's like certain
how
things.
That's how I handle it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I never saw it as something that made you stupid, because the smartest people I know smoked weed. My dad is one of the smartest people I know. And I mean, like, I grew up in an apartment with, he had like thousands of books in here about all types of stuff, not just about black people and black things, but about everything. And
which ought to be obvious if you listen to what I'm saying. And
he would just, you know, books and read this and that and just quotes off the top of his head. And so I never had this idea that it made people dumb. And now that I am into the science of it, I know that that's not the case. And all of his friends, all their brains are still intact. And cannabis,
and they're all in the 80s.
They're all in the 80s, yeah. And cannabis is neuroprotective. It actually helps to protect your brain cells. It helps you to regenerate more brain cells, actually. So
I tell you this, it sure is wonderful to know that something you've been doing that you really like doing. It wasn't sure whether it was good. I knew marijuana was good to me, but I didn't know whether it was good for me. You understand? But I just decided, what the hell, you got to go out here some kind of way, and I'm going out high.
and the thing about it, too, was that now that I've become, like, I didn't realize that so many people were sent to jail for weed because of the crime bill. Because from my perspective, like growing up in Harlem in the 80s, there was crackheads everywhere. There were crackheads everywhere. Like, if any kid who grew up in New York in the 80s, it was just like, there was crack vials all over the floor. And people the crackheads used to put the tops back on the bottles, all these different colors. So as a kid, it looked like Skittles all over the ground, and you just wanted to touch it and pick it up. And your parents would always tell you, don't touch it. And there were crackheads everywhere. So, like, we didn't need that message, crack is whack, because we saw all these crackheads and they were just crazy. So the crack dealers were a problem. But I grew up around weed, and then what was the other thing I was going to say was that now, like, that I'm seeing so many people got sent to prison for weed, but it's like, I grew up around it. My dad was always unapologetic about it. Used to speak at the Million Marijuana March, like you said.
Yeah, that's right.
And I didn't know anybody that got locked up for it.
They had
a
Million Marijuana March here. Million Marijuana Smokers March every year. And the thing about it is, it would be so many of us out there that when we light up, the police was helpless. You understand what I'm saying? Unless you were a straggler and got caught around the edges, away from the crowd, they would snatch a straggler every now and then, just saying, to make an example out of somebody. But if you were in the middle of the crowd like me, I was one of the keynote speakers every year, and then they would say, all right, let's fire up the chronic. And everybody would pull out their herb and fire up. Manhattan would be downtown being engulfed in a cloud of reefer smoke. But I just thought it was bullshit. And I was not going to allow them to deprive me of one of my, most wonderful pleasures. First of all, for me, I mean, I'm glad to know scientifically, that it has benefits for the brain, because I know that a lot of times when I'm writing, I fire up, and my thoughts just, they just flow. You understand? And you know how often I write. I write
all the time,
hundreds of essays, and about everything, and so. I'm delighted to know that marijuana has. Now, Kata, the one other thing I wanted to talk about was we're going to have a series of discussions about Donald Trump, but I want to talk about one aspect of Trump.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Somebody asked, how often do you smoke, and do you smoke it with tobacco? He smokes the joints and the rolling papers, which I hate. He doesn't smoke weed with tobacco, but he has
absolutely not.
But he has a cigar. Pick up your cigar.
Yeah,
I don't understand cigar smoking. He's always had the...
Yeah, I have a cigar, but see, you don't have to inhale a cigar to enjoy it. I don't inhale it, I just suck on it and blow it out of my nose. I like the smell and what have you, bouquet, but I don't inhale it. I don't inhale tobacco. I did for years, though. You see, I did for many, many years, and I consider myself to be very lucky. The only thing I inhale is marijuana. And if that's going to take me out of here, well, my days are numbered. But anyway, I'm 80 years old. You see what I'm saying?
Your brain is very much intact, and so are like all of your friends. I mean, growing up with with Mike Thelwell, my uncle Mike, who wrote Stokely Carmichael's autobiography, aka Kwame Ture,
with an essay by your father at the end.
Yes,
you're in the tradition, which places both the book and Kwame Ture in the historical tradition of Pan-African revolutionaries. So you should read the book. It's the best single book written about the Pan-African revolutionary struggle in the last half of the 20th century. It's called Ready for Revolution, the autobiography of Stokely Carmichael, a.k.a. Kwame Ture, written with her uncle Mike Thelwell, as he's talking about, who's one of the great writers of the 20th century.
And he, he definitely, he's in his 80s, and he's completely on point. And he's been smoking weed and growing weed.
Grow weed every
growing
week.
it.
Yeah.
Professor, so I never had this idea that it makes you dumb. Now, I don't think that kids should be smoking it. Like, I don't think that
teenagers shouldn't be smoking.
Yeah, I don't think so. But I think that when using it, this is a different conversation, but If someone is using it, if a young person is using it medicinally, that's different because there are medicinal applications. But just like recreationally, just smoking, I don't think that it's good to be doing that when you're young. So I did take that advice of like wait till you're grown. And I used to look when I was in high school. I looked down on people that smoke weed, meaning like teenagers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what were you about to say about?
Well, I was gonna say I want to talk about Donald Trump. Now, the thing is that we're gonna have a series of conversations about Trump, right? Because for one thing, I have written a series of very insightful essays about Donald Trump.
Well, you know what? So we're going to have a series of conversations about Donald Trump, but if you want to tell your story real quick that you wanted to tie into the hip-hop conversation.
Well, this is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yes, I'm saying this is, well, when they say tied into it, the point is the question of the figure of the black gentleman gangster arises again here, you know? That I just talked about in talking about the history, you know, of the black gentleman gangster class. You know, one of the most successful of them is Don King. Few people know this, but Don King went to Case Western Reserve, you know, which is one of the nation's great universities. He had to drop out. His father was killed in an industrial accident. And just like these other black gangsters I've told you about, he needed to make money. So he got in the numbers business. You know, he got in the numbers business. Guy tried to beat him out his money. He beat a guy to death with his hands because he's a big, powerful guy, you know. And nobody, at that one I think he got away with. And I think he shot another guy, you know. And he finally didn't go to jail, but he got out. He was pardoned, you know. And so he became a nightclub owner. That's how he met Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was a big fan of an act called, of a singer called, a band leader named Lloyd Price, you know. Muhammad Ali and I are the same age, you know what I mean? We're just a few months apart. And most of the people that he liked, in terms of rhythm and blues, popular music, the same people I like. He loved Little Richard. He loved Sam Cooke. If you remember when he beat Sonny Liston, he said, "That's Sam Cooke. Let him in the ring. He's the greatest rock and roll singer in the world. Let him up here. Let him up here." When Sam Cooke came up, he said, "See, this Sam Cooke. He pretty like me. He pretty like me." You know what I mean? So Ali was one of a kind, my buddy. You know, I love him. But anyway, the thing is that he went to see Lloyd Price at this nightclub that Don King owned. And Lloyd Price and Don King were good friends, whatever, because Lloyd Price was three-quarters gangster too. He's from New Orleans, right? Part of that great New Orleans group of rhythm and blues singers like Shirley and Lee, you know? What's his name? Alan Toussaint wrote Summer Nights. You know, he's wonderful. New Orleans, Fats Domino, you know, Huey Smith and the Clowns, all of these great rhythm and blues groups that came out of New Orleans that were the foundations of rhythm and blues. Lloyd Price was one. You know, he's the one that made the ballad Stagger Lee. You know, the night was warm, cold, and the moon was yellow, and the leaves came tumbling down. And Stagger Lee is the quintessential bad nigga in Afro-American folklore. You know, Stagger Lee stabbed Billy. Oh, he hurt that poor boy so bad. You know, they got in a fight over a dice game, and Stagger Lee stabbed him. So this is a classic, you know, this characterization of the bad nigga in Afro-American folk culture. And anyway, Lloyd Price sang it to death. Go on, Stagger Lee, go, Stagger. We was doing the chicken back in them days, right? You know, I was too cool. I'm telling you, I was cool. You know what I mean? If I had been in the cooler, they used to call me Breeze, but they had to call me Deep Freeze if I was in the cooler. You know what I'm saying? And I used to sing with a rhythm and blues group too. You know, I sang bass. You know. So anyway, the thing is that Ali used to go to hang out to see Lloyd Price, and this is when he was getting near to winning the title. You know, and Don King got to know him then. You know. And you know, and Don King thought this guy, he's up and coming, he's gonna be somebody. So when Ali became champ, Don King already knew him. You know, and it was just a matter of him getting in the position, you know, to be able to offer Ali what he wanted. But him and Don King made a lot of money together. The thing is, you know, is that Don King Don King is the greatest promoter since P.T. Barnum, you know, and the great carnival promoter with the P.T. Barnum with the Ringling Brothers.
But the Barnum and Billy house is like.
You read right down there. Yeah, I know. I got pictures of it. I
like
tell you,
a few blocks
looked like
from here.
a castle. Yeah, I took pictures of it. Yeah, I made many pictures of it. But it's called it the greatest show on earth. You know what I'm saying? Well, Don King is cut from the same cloth. Don King took boxers. When Don King met Larry Holmes was boxing for $400 a fight in back bar rooms and shit in Eastern Pennsylvania. Don King made him a multimillionaire many times over. So when you hear these guys crying about Don King robbed me, most of them motherfuckers didn't have a quarter when they met Don King. Don King made more millionaires. One time they talked about they was going. Now I ain't saying he wasn't a dirty motherfucker because he was. You know what I'm saying? And if you read my piece, you'll see that I ain't no pull no bones about that. You understand? But a lot of people made a lot of money with Don King, right? But here's the thing. Every time I listen to these white folks talk about who is responsible, who shaped Trump's, you know, style, you know, where did Trump get this out of? And they talk about this little pipsqueak lawyer, you know, what's his name? I mean, he was a cold-blooded lawyer, you know, but Don King, first there was his daddy. Then there was this lawyer who had served on the with just Senator McCarthy's cold-blooded. You understand what I'm saying? And I can't think of his name right now, but him. They always mention them, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm saying that Don King had a tremendous effect on the way Donald Trump, you know, conducts himself, his style, and that's what I seek to show in this piece. Right? And the reason is not hard to understand. Donald Trump wants to be thought of as a tough guy. He was going around telling people he's a self-made man. Motherfucker daddy gave him $400 million. How you gonna be self-made? Donald Trump was a millionaire at 8 years old. His daddy set up these funds. He was a millionaire at 8 years old. You know what I mean? This sucker never had to struggle for nothing in his life. You understand? So, and he thought he's a self-made man. Mm-hmm. But when he meets Don King, he meets the real fucking deal. Mm-hmm. Don King is a tough guy. Don King is a self-made man. Yet, if you read this piece of mine, you will see pictures of Don King introducing Donald Trump to President George Bush the First. Don King managed the greatest fighters in the world. Everybody is a fight fan, especially kind of guys who be in politics and business and shit. They're all fight fans. Donald Trump, when I met Donald Trump was trying to take big time boxing out of Las Vegas, to take it away from Steve Wynn at the Sands where all the big fights were being held. Of it. You see, here's the thing.